Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's success story interview where we're here with Aldin, and they recently matched in the 2021 match. So, welcome. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much. This is a pleasure.
Fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about your match, where you got into, what specialty and program?
Yeah, so I applied only for general surgery programs. This was, I figured out that I really just wanted to do general surgery. I didn't have any backup programs, so to say. I ended up interviewing in approximately like 15 places, and I ended up matching in Southern California in my number one choice.
Amazing. Congratulations. And what's the name of the program again?
Yeah, so the program is Arrowhead Regional Medical Center. It's a, I think it's a great program, and it's probably why I ranked it number one. But it's a sort of a combination between a community program and you also rotate at a Kaiser Hospital, which is like an HMO group, and so you get a combination of your community county patients, and then you also get a combination of working with like your I have private insurance patients.
Hmm. And did you have any connection to that program before applying to residency?
Yeah, definitely. So this program was the program where I did my third and fourth year rotations at as a medical student. So I think having done those rotations there really did help also help me develop like connections and relationships with some of the attendings and residents in general surgery.
Perfect. And so, how did you actually get to do your rotations in that specific hospital?
Yeah, so I went to St. George's University. St. George's, once you complete step one, assigns you to a hospital. They do ask that, do you have a preference of where you'd like to go? And a lot of times they do try to give you that preference. And they also try to put you in locations where it's close to family, it's, near where you might live. And so for me, that was California. And there's other hospitals in California, but I specifically asked to be at this program just because they do offer, they've offered students in the past a residency. So I thought that was a great place to be at. So one, you can, if that program has a history of taking SGU students, I should probably go there. And
Yeah.
then also, it was kind of luck just because they do have also other hospitals in California where I could have been placed.
So, what was your actual experience like when you were rotating as a medical student?
Yeah, so I think that some of my experience there was one really good. It's a program where the medical students do have quite a bit of autonomy, and you're able to do a lot of hands-on learning, and a lot's expected of students there. And so
Mhm.
because of this, you come out of this program really strong. I think I ended up doing one audition rotation in my fourth year, and then having worked there my third year and partially like half of my fourth year. What some of the feedback I got was that that I worked at a higher capacity than they expected me to than like a fourth year medical student. So that's something that I think is really great about this program for students, anyways, is that you're pushed a lot and you're pushed to grow as much as you can and as much as you want to, really.
Mhm. And did you know that you were going to be pursuing general surgery when you started, or did you kind of verify that at a certain point? How did that work for you in your journey?
Yeah, definitely. So I want to say that I kept an open mind when I went into third year. I originally thought I wanted to do something like internal medicine. I had worked and volunteered at a HEMONC center in Arizona when I was doing my undergraduate studies there. And so that's where I thought I originally wanted to go into. And but when I got to third year, I told myself it's better to keep an open mind and kind of figure out exactly what you'd like to do. So my first rotation was not in surgery at all. It was psychiatry. And after psychiatry, I did family medicine. And after that, I did a HEMONC subspecialty. And then I did general surgery. And once I started, I realized just how much I liked it, how much I enjoyed the combination of medical management plus, being able to take this patient to the operating room. It wasn't until the very end where it solidified it. I remember my last day of my rotation, I was scrubbing into a case and I had my shelf exam the next day. So that I think, and I mean, the case went until midnight, and so you have your self exam at 7 in the morning. And I think that was when I realized I'm like, this is something that I'm really passionate about, that I'm willing to spend this much extra time at the hospital to do. And at that point, I just stopped. I sort of stopped doubting myself and doubting that I couldn't do it, and I just went full force with applying general surgery.
Did you stay in contact with the program after you completed your rotations and when you were applying for residency during the main application season?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think that's something that is really beneficial for students to do, and that's something that I did. I'll take it a step back and I'll talk about my third year. I did general surgery is a 12-week rotation for my school. And so in those 12 weeks, I ended up doing, it was in the winter months. And then afterwards, I did internal medicine. And so for me, when I knew that I wanted to do general surgery, when I was in my internal medicine rotation, I ended up on days where, it was an 8-hour day or we got out earlier, I ended up staying later to help out with general surgery cases, assist with anything that I can do, and sort of see as much more procedures as I can as a student, just because I knew that it would help me later in the future as a incoming intern.
Yeah.
I think that helps. I think that shows even more passion when they ask you like, oh, why are you still on the service? And then I go, well, I'm actually in internal medicine. I'm just here staying a little bit late because I really want to do this case, or I really want to help out in some way that I can. Afterwards, I think when I went into my fourth year rotation, I did do one additional audition rotation, and that's, I think, really important just because it gives the program another chance to evaluate you, and also gives the program another chance to see your face. And I think that's super important, is showing face, and so they don't forget about you. Especially if you're gonna, and the most important thing that you're gonna do on your rotation is you're gonna just work really, really hard. And so I did do that. And then afterwards, I ended up rotating in different specialties that weren't necessarily surgery, but interacted with surgery staff.
And can you tell us a little bit about what letters of recommendation you applied with in that case?
One was was my program director, who's also a minimally invasive surgeon. There was a chief of trauma letter, and then like a burn director as well. So those all, I think, help because they were letters of rec from general surgeons, but they were letters of rec in different fields. And then that also can show that, hey, like you are interested in this field, but you're also pretty good at in different subspecialties of this field.
Mm-hmm. So when you actually started applying, can you tell us a little bit about your application process, like what you used to decide where to apply and why you applied in certain places?
Yeah, definitely. So, one, I'm going to say that when you want to apply for a surgery specialty, it's really important to just apply as broad as you can. I think that having an idea of like, oh, I only really want to do general surgery if I get to go to this hospital, you might want to rethink if you really want to do general surgery. So for me, I knew I wanted to do surgery, and I was fine with going anywhere between like Nebraska, Florida, New York, and hopefully the West Coast. So to find what programs I wanted to apply to, instead of applying to every single program, this was one advice that was given to me when I applied was, apply to every single program out there. And I'm like, that's financially I can't do that. And then two, I don't think it makes sense if the program's never taken an international medical student, especially someone from my school. It just, why would I waste the time applying there? So I did use actually Natural Residence. That was super, super helpful. It gave me the baseline of where I wanted to apply to. And then from there, I also looked at my school's list of students where they ended up matching at, not necessarily interviewing at, but where they ended up matching to which programs they matched to in general surgery. And then I also applied to those programs. There was probably 100% overlap, if I remember correctly, but there might have been a few programs here and there that overlap did not exist yet. But yeah.
Great. And when you actually got to taking interviews, how did those go for you?
Yeah, so I think that, this year's interview cycle was probably the strangest one that we've had. The ERAS application was moved back a month. Everything was virtual, and you had to learn different techniques on how to interview well on things like Zoom and Skype. From having good lighting, a good internet connection, a good microphone, a good camera. I think those are all really important things. So I ended up buying an additional camera. I ended up buying a ring light to kind of so they can see your face a bit better, white screen for the background so that you don't have a lot of distracting things in the background. And then also just having good, stable internet connection was super important. And then from there, it was learning how to look at the camera rather than the person's face on the screen. I think that was something that was really unique and different because when you're looking at somebody's face on the screen, you are actually looking down and it might look a little bit distracting. So you want to look at the camera.
Yeah.
But my interviews, they all went pretty well. I think I would say that they all were roughly about, they seemed shorter than I think a standard interview where you would be there all day. They were about, 2 to 4 hours long. And I think that, for the most part, everything ran smooth. I think most people got the hang of the Zoom interviews pretty quickly on.
Do you have advice for people that are in medical school, getting ready to either, start their medical school journey or are studying for the USMLEs?
Yeah, so I definitely. So I started a tutoring company after I took step one, and so I definitely would love to give some advice for that. But before that, when people are starting their medical school journey, I think one of the important things is that was told to me, and and it's very true. But learning to study for your medical school coursework is one of the best ways you can prepare for your step one. I think a lot of times students might get bogged down with ideas that I need to learn how to study for boards and for step one material and not my coursework. There was plenty of material that my step prep did not cover that was in random slides that I had remembered, from my earlier coursework as my year one and year two. So I would say just study really hard and then don't get bogged down with the board prep yet. And then when it comes to step one of the most important things that I'll say is that something that I had a difficult time with was just anxiety about the step one. You tend to hyper focus, and I hyper focus on what scores I was getting. And during the exam itself, I would start looking at questions and I would tell myself, okay, when you read this question, if you get this one question right, that's going to increase your score by 2 points. And then, you just need to get 5 more questions right than last time, you're going to go up 10 points. And, you have these ideas during the test, when during the test, you should be interacting with the questions and treating it like a puzzle. I think that's one of the best things that I do is to me, it's you have a list of symptoms, chief complaints, and treat it like a puzzle, and you're just matching it to a diagnosis, and then you're picking the best answer. But from there, the anxiety was really something that I think had crippled me and sort of made my score stagnant. And so I started to incorporate mindfulness techniques and different meditation techniques. There was an app I used called Headspace that really helped teach me some of those mindfulness techniques. And it's something that, right now I'm studying for step 3 and I'm using the same things that I did for step 1, the same methods and the same, mindfulness and same meditation techniques to help me get through that.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the tutoring service and, if that came up in interviews, for example, were people curious about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, so the tutoring service was something that did come up, and the reason why I started it was because I felt like being an international medical student, there wasn't a lot of tutoring companies that tailored to the international medical student struggle. A lot of companies started, and they were started by US graduates. And there is, I think, this added pressure for, IMGs to do really, really well on step 1 and step 2. And sometimes that might not be understood by somebody who's a US student. And so that's where White Coat Tutors came from. And it was sort of to give back to the international medical graduate community. Additionally, I am not a native born, US citizen. I'm from Bosnia, and English was not my first language. And so even in my undergraduate time, I took English classes that helped me learn how to read questions, standardized questions better. And that's something that, I think that if I can learn, if somebody like me who did not know English coming to the United States, if I can learn how to take these exams and I can learn how to read these exams better, then I think I can teach somebody else the same stuff that I've learned to do really well on these step 1 and step 2. And during the interview process, that was something that came up quite a bit, because a lot of times, programs might say like, wow, you have great scores. How did you get through it? Or where did White Coat Tutors come from? And it was just the exact same reason. It was wanting to help others. And at the same time, me having, found this need of, or sort of having a difficult time doing it myself in the past. And now I've learned it, so I want to teach it to others.
That's amazing. Was there anything in the application season that caught you off guard, or if you had to do it again, you would change if you were applying?
Yeah, so anything that had caught me off guard, I think the first thing was, so this was really tough. One was the timing of some of my interviews. And I don't think I could probably change this, but when I interviewed at certain programs, I figured that, okay, if I have one day to interview, that's just one day. I don't have to travel. I can do it from home. And so in December, I scheduled probably 8 or more interviews. But it is extremely tiring to interview at 8 programs, even virtually. And so especially when some of my programs are on the East Coast and they want to interview at 7 a.m. their time, which is now 4 a.m. or 4 a.m. my time on the West Coast. And so like that time difference gets very tiring, especially if the interview is like even like 4 or 5 hours long. And then if you have them just stacked back to back, that becomes pretty difficult. And so one thing that I would have done, and that I think I underestimated, was just putting too many interviews in 1 month. I think that it would have been much better if I spaced things out a little bit more. But then also one thing that I think I did that was, I would have done regardless of if it was in person or virtual, was making sure that you interview at your top choice or your top choices in the middle of your interview season. And I think that's something that a lot of people might think it's better to interview at your top choice early on and just get it out the way. For me, I treated my earlier interviews as more of a practice run for my later interviews, because it takes a little bit of time to figure out how you want to answer some of those standard questions that come up and how to answer them with enthusiasm. If you interview too late, then sometimes your enthusiasm drops and then it just sounds like you're just repeating the same thing over and over. So I found that the middle point was probably the best time to interview at programs that you felt like you were going to rank really high. So my out of my interview bracket, I think my 7th or 8th interview, which was directly in the middle of how many interviews I had, was my number 1 choice. And I felt like I had found that sweet point between being enthusiastic about the program, having good answers for some of those trickier questions, and having good answers for some of those more standard questions was a good was just the perfect timing to do it in the middle.
Were there questions that were common throughout your interviews?
Yeah. So the first question, that everyone's going to ask you is, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I think that question is a perfect, that question. And one other question is something that somebody might say like reflexively when they join a interview, like chat, is, oh, how are you doing? So those 2 questions I made sure I had a good answer for, because the how are you doing question, you can use it to sort of segue and describe something versus just saying, I'm good, how are you? I would say something like, I'm good, I just got done doing a hike, especially, if my interview was at 10 a.m., I usually like to hike before my interviews, or just do a walk. That then allows me to connect with the interviewer on maybe they're also an avid hiker. And there was a couple of times when they were an avid hiker, or they, I walked my dog and they were like, oh, what kind of dog do you have? And then it kind of breaks the ice a little bit better than just like, oh, I'm good, how are you? The other one was, tell me about yourself. And that one was something that you want a good answer, but you want to make sure your answer isn't like you're reading it off a piece of paper. So I made sure there was like few bullets that I had, like maybe 4 or 5 things that I wanted to mention. And then from there, if I added in additional stuff, that was great. If I didn't, then I was okay with that as well.
Is there any advice that you would give to people starting the residency application process for the first time?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So first thing I would recommend is there are multiple integral things that I think are important for the ERAS application. Like one, just like getting it in on time, like the first day that it opens is super important. Two, making sure that when you go through your CV, try and hit at least one thing for all the different aspects that is in the ERAS application. If you have done research in your undergraduate days, it's okay to mention that in the ERAS application. If you have volunteered at different places, it's okay to mention that as well. If it was, years ago, you want to try to have something for everything, and it's sort of like having a checklist. The other thing that I think is really important was your personal statement. Like I said, I'm not an English, like English isn't my first language, and I probably have about 12 to 15 different revisions for my personal statement until I came down to my final one. And in different specialties, I think you'll find different flavors of personal statements. In surgery, you don't want to be too long. A lot of times surgeons might not read the whole thing because it's too long. And that's some advice that was given to me by different fifth-year residents at the program I matched at. I asked them if I can get their advice on my personal statement. And the first thing that was told me was it was too long. It was longer than a page, and then I immediately knew I had to shorten it down. And then, but that might be okay for different other programs like internal medicine or family medicine. They might be okay with the additional story or the additional link. So making sure you convey your message as accurately as you can, but also realize that you're applying for a job necessarily. And so you want to showcase like how amazing you are, but also be humble. So it can be very difficult, I think. And, I ended up finding help for it. And I ended up reaching out to a lot of my friends who were English majors and getting inspiration from them and just reading different personal statements online, kind of find out like, okay, like what is okay, what isn't okay to say.
And where do you see yourself moving and growing towards in your career as you continue your training down general surgery?
Yeah. So at the moment, I probably see myself doing a fellowship in the future. I am the kind of person who wants to sort of be really good in one thing, but then at the same time, general surgery is when you specialize from general surgery and do a fellowship, you still have the opportunity to do your basic surgeries like your hernias, your gallbladder. So that's something that I really like about this field. I'll probably end up doing a trauma, critical care, and burn fellowship. That's something that I'm very interested in now, and it's something that I've been interested in the last 2 years. I've done research in burn, I've done research in critical care medicine, and so that's where I see myself heading towards. And then, more importantly, I think once my training's done, residency's done, fellowship's done, I probably see myself working in an academic setting. Something that's really important to me is medical education, and I think from that, surgical education as well. And so I'd like to work with medical students, residents, being able to teach in some capacity.
Amazing. And is there any way that people can continue to stay in touch with you or follow your journey as you continue to advance over the next few years?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, if anybody ever wants any advice or anything regarding step prep for any of the step exams, they can always reach out on whitecoattutors.com. I'm happy to always like have a conversation with people, even if they just want advice. They don't even need to get any service. But then also I have an Instagram that people can follow me on. It's my first name, ALDIN _ last name, MALKOC _ MD.
Perfect. Do you have any parting words or final ideas that you want to share with everybody before we conclude here?
Yeah, so I think that I think that so I'm going to say that the medical school journey is really long. And then I just want to tell people that once you get to the point that you're applying, it's a good time to reflect back on everything you've done up to that point, because you have now probably completed 4 years of undergraduate school, 3 years of medical school at the minimum. And so, reflect back, enjoy it, enjoy your 4th year, have some time off before you start residency, and hopefully I can interact with some of those people as colleagues in the future.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insight and share some of the ideas and techniques you used for, getting those rotations early on and communicating with your program to get your #1 match. So congratulations again for that, and thank you again.
Of course. Thank you.